As the subject revived, he would become aware that he was being questioned about his secrets, and, depending upon his personality, his fear of discovery, or the degree of his disillusionment with the doctor, grow negativistic, hostile, or physically aggressive. Occasionally, patients had to be forcibly restrained during this period, so to prevent injury to themselves or others as the doctor continued to interrogate. Some patients, moved by fear and diffuse anger, the assumption that they had already been tricked into confessing, and a still limited sense of discretion, defiantly acknowledged their guilt and challenged the observer to, quote, do something about it, end quote. As the excitement passed, some fell back on their original stories, and others verified the confessed material. During the follow-up period, 9 of the 17 admitted the validity of their confessions. 8 repudiated their confessions and reaffirmed their earlier accounts. With respect to the reliability of the results of such interrogation, Gerson and Viktorov concluded that persistent, careful questioning can reduce ambiguities in drug interrogation, but cannot eliminate them altogether. At least one experiment has shown that subjects are capable of maintaining a lie while under the influence of a barbiturate. Redlich and his associates at Yale, citation 25, administered sodium amytal to 9 volunteers, students, and professionals who had previously, for purposes of the experiment, revealed shameful and guilt-producing episodes of their past and then invented false self-protective stories to cover them. In nearly every case, the cover story retained some elements of guilt inherent in the true story. Under the influence of the drug, the subjects were cross-examined on their cover stories by a second investigator. The results, though not definitive, showed that normal individuals who had good defenses and no overt pathological traits could stick to their invented stories and refuse confession. Neurotic individuals with strong unconscious self-punitive tendencies, on the other hand, both confessed more easily and were inclined to substitute fantasy for truth, confessing to offenses never actually committed. In recent years, drug therapy has made some use of stimulants, most notably amphetamine, benzedrine, and its relative methamphetamine, methadone. These drugs, used either alone or following intravenous barbiturates, produced an outpouring of ideas, emotions, and memories which has been of help in diagnosing mental disorders. The potential of stimulants in interrogation has received little attention unless in unpublished work. In one study of their psychiatric use, Brussel et al., citation 7, maintain that methadone gives the liar no time to think or to organize his deceptions. Once the drug takes hold, they say, in an insurmountable urge to pour out speech traps, the malingerer, Gottschalk, on the other hand, says that this claim is extravagant, asserting without elaboration that the study lacked poor controls. Citation 13. It is evident that the combined use of barbiturates and stimulants, perhaps along with ataraxics or tranquilizers, should be further explored. Observations from practice. J. M. MacDonald, who, as a psychiatrist for the District Courts of Denver, has had extensive experience with narcoanalysis, says that drug interrogation is of doubtful value in obtaining confessions to crimes. Criminal suspects under the influence of barbiturates may deliberately withhold information, persist in giving untruthful answers, or falsely confess to crimes they did not commit. The psychopathic personalities, in particular, appear to resist successfully the influence of drugs. MacDonald tells of a criminal psychopath who, having agreed to narco-interrogation, received 1.5 grams of sodium amytal over a period of 5 hours. This man feigned amnesia and gave a false account of murder. Quote, he displayed little or no remorse as he falsely described the crime, including burial of the body. Indeed, he was very self-possessed, and he appeared almost to enjoy the examination. From time to time, he would request that more amytal be injected. Citation 21. Observations from practice. No, I'm sorry. MacDonald concludes that a person who gives false information prior to receiving drugs is likely to give false information also under narcosis. Sorry. I finished page 33 and I'm on page 34. That the drugs are of little value for revealing deceptions, and that they are more effective in releasing unconsciously repressed material than in invoking consciously suppressed information. Another psychiatrist known for his work with criminals, L. Z. Friedman, gave sodium amytal to men accused of various civil and military antisocial acts. The subjects were mentally unstable in their conditions, ranging from character disorders to neurosis and psychoses. The drug interviews proved psychiatrically beneficial to patients, but Friedman found that his point of objective reality was seldom proved by the revelations. He was unable to say on the basis of the narco interrogation whether a given act had or had not occurred. Like MacDonald, he found that psychopathic individuals can deny to the point of unconsciousness crimes, that every objective sign indicates that they have committed. Citation 10. F. G. Inbao, professor of law at Northwestern University, who had considerable experience observing and participating in, quote, truth, end quote, drug tests, claims that they are occasionally effective on persons who would have disclosed the truth anyway, and they've been properly interrogated, but that person determined to lie will usually be able to continue the deception under drugs. The two military psychiatrists who made the most extensive use of narcoanalysis during the war years, Roy R. Grinker and John C. Spiegel, concluded that in almost all the cases they could obtain from their patients, essentially the same material, and gave them the same emotional release by therapy without the use of drugs, provided they had sufficient time. The essence of these comments from professionals of long experience is that drugs provide rapid access to information that is psychiatrically useful but of doubtful validity as empirical truth. The same psychological information and less adulterated empirical truth can be obtained from fully conscious subjects through non-drug psychotherapy and skillful police interrogation. Application to CI interrogation. The almost total absence of controlled experiments in the study of, quote, truth, end quote, drugs, and the spotty and anecdotal nature of psychiatric and police evidence require that extrapolations to intelligence operations be made with care. Still, enough is known about the drugs action to suggest certain considerations affecting the possibilities for their use in interrogations. It should be clear from the foregoing that at best a drug can only serve as an aid to an interrogator who has a sure understanding of the psychology and techniques of normal interrogation. In some respects, indeed, the demands on his skill will be increased by the baffling mixture of truth and fantasy in drug-induced output, and the tendencies against which he must guard in the interrogate to give the responses that seem to be wanted without regard for facts will be heightened by drugs. The literature abounds with warnings that a subject in narcosis is extremely suggestible. It seems possible that this suggestibility and the lowered guard of the narcotic state might be put to advantage in the case of a subject feigning ignorance of a language or some other skill that had become automatic with him. Lipton, citation 20, found sodium amytal helpful in determining whether a foreign subject was merely pretending not to understand English. By extension, one can guess that a drug interrogatee might have difficulty maintaining the pretense he did not comprehend the idiom of a profession he was trying to hide. There is the further problem of hostility in the interrogator's relationship to a resistance source. The accumulated knowledge about, quote, truth and quote, drugs reaction has come largely from patient-physician relationships of trust and confidence. The subject in narcoanalysis is usually motivated a priori to cooperate with the psychiatrist, either to obtain relief from mental suffering or to contribute to a scientific study. Even in police work, where an atmosphere of anxiety and threat may be dominant, a relationship of trust frequently asserts itself. The drug is administered by a medical man bound by a strict code of ethics. The suspect agreeing to undergo narcoanalysis in a desperate bid for corroboration of his testimony trusts both drugs and psychiatrists. However, apprehensively and finally, as Friedman and MacDonald have indicated, the police psychiatrists frequently deal with a, quote, sick and, quote, criminal, and some order of patient-physician relationship necessarily evolves. End of page 34. Beginning of page 35. Rarely has a drug interrogation involved, quote, normal and, quote, individuals in a hostile or genuinely threatening milieu. It was from a non-threatening experimental setting that Eric Lindemann could say that his, quote, normal and, quote, subjects, quote, reported a general sense of euphoria, ease, and confidence, and they exhibited a marked increase in talkativeness and communicability, end quote. Citation 18. Gerson and Viktorov listed poor doctor-patient rapport as one factor interfering with the completeness and authenticity of confessions by the Fort Dix soldiers, caught as they were in a command performance, and they told they had no choice but to submit to narco-interrogation. From all indications, subject-interrogator rapport is usually crucial to obtaining the psychological release, which may lead to unguarded disclosures. Role-playing on the part of the interrogator might be a possible solution to the problem of establishing rapport with a drugged subject. In therapy, British narcoanalyst William Sargent recommends that the therapist deliberately distort the facts of the patient's life experience to achieve heightened emotional response and abreaction. Citation 27. In a drunken state of narcoanalysis, patients are prone to accept the therapist's false constructions. There is reason to expect a drugged subject would communicate freely with an interrogator, playing the role of relative, colleague, physician, immediate supervisor, or any other person to whom his background indicated he would be responsive. Even when rapport is poor, however, there remains one facet of drug action eminently exploitable in interrogation: the fact that subjects emerge from narcosis feeling they have revealed a great deal, even when they have not. As Gerson and Viktorov demonstrate at Fort Dix, this psychological set provides a major opening for obtaining genuine confessions. Possible variations. In studies by Beecher and his associates, citations 3 through 6, one third to one-half of the individuals tested proved to be placebo reactors. Subjects who responded with symptomatic relief to the administration of any syringe, pill, or capsule, regardless of what it contains. Although no studies are known to have been made of the placebo phenomenon as applied to narco-interrogation, it seems reasonable that when a subject's sense of guilt interferes with productive interrogation, a placebo for pseudonarcosis could have the effect of absolving him of the responsibility for his acts and thus clear the way for free communication. It is notable that placebos are most likely to be effective in situations of stress. The individuals most likely to react to placebos are the most anxious, more self-centered, more dependent on outside stimulation, those who express their needs more freely, socially Talkers who drain off anxiety by conversing with others, the non-reactors, are those clinically more rigid and with better than average emotional intelligence. No sex or IQ difference between reactors and non-reactors have been found. Another possibility might be the combined use of drugs with hypnotic trance and post-hypnotic suggestion. Hypnosis could presumably prevent any recollection of the drug experience, whether a subject can be brought to trance against his will or unaware, however, is a matter of some disagreement. Orne, in a survey of the potential uses of hypnosis in interrogation, citation 23, asserts that it is doubtful, many apparent indications to the contrary, that trance can be induced in resistant subjects. It may be possible, he adds, to hypnotize a subject unaware, but this would require a positive relationship with the hypnotist, not likely to be found in the interrogating settings. In medical hypnosis, pentothal sodium is sometimes employed when only light trance has been induced and sleep narcosis is desired. This procedure could be a possibility for interrogation, but if satisfactory level of narcosis could be achieved through hypnotic trance, there would appear to be no need for drugs. Defensive measures. There is no known way of building tolerance for a, quote, truth, end quote, drug without creating a disabling addiction or of arresting the action of a barbiturate once induced. The only full safeguard against narco-interrogation is to prevent the administration of the drug. Short of this, the best defense is to make use of the same knowledge that suggests drugs for offensive operations. If a subject knows that on emerging from narcosis, he will have an exaggerated notion of how much he has revealed, he can better resolve to deny he has said anything. End of page 35. Beginning of page 36. The disadvantages and shortcomings of drugs in offensive operations become positive features of the defense posture. The subject in narco interrogation is intoxicated, wavering between deep sleep and semi-wakefulness. His speech is garbled and irrational. The amount of output drastically diminished. Drugs disrupt established thought patterns, including the will to resist, but they do so indiscriminately, and thus also interfere with the patterns of substantive information the interrogator seeks. Even under the conditions most favorable for the interrogator, output will be contaminated by fantasy, distortion, and untruth. Possibly the most effective way to arm oneself against narco-interrogation would be to undergo a, quote, dry run, end quote, a trial drug interrogation with output taped for playback would familiarize an individual with his own reactions to truth drugs, and this familiarity would help reduce the effects of harassment by the interrogator before and after the drug has been administered. From the viewpoint of intelligence services, the trial exposure of a particular operative to drugs might provide a rough benchmark for assessing the kind of and amount of information he would divulge in narcosis. There may be concern over the possibility of drug addiction, intentionally or accidentally induced by an adversary service. Most drugs will cause addiction with prolonged use, and the barbiturates are no exception. In recent studies at the U.S. Public Health Service Hospital for Addicts in Lexington, Kentucky, subjects received large doses of barbiturates over a period of months. Upon removal of the drug, they experienced acute withdrawal symptoms and behaved in every respect like chronic addicts. Because their action is extremely short, however, and because there is little likelihood that they would be administered regularly over a prolonged period. Barbiturate truth drugs present a slight risk of operational addiction if the withdrawal if the adversary service were intent on creating addiction. In order to exploit withdrawal, it would have other more rapid means of producing states as unpleasant as withdrawal symptoms. The hallucinatory and psychotomimetic drugs such as mescaline, marijuana, LSD-25, and nicotine are sometimes mistakenly associated with narcoanalytic interrogation. These drugs distort the perception and interpretation of the sensory input to the central nervous system and affect vision, audition, smell, the sensation of the body parts and their position in space, etc. Mescaline and LSD-25 have been used to create experimental, quote, psychotic states, end quote, and in a minor way as aids in psychotherapy, since information obtained from a person in a psychotic drug state would be unrealistic, bizarre, and extremely difficult to assess. The self-administration of LSD-25, which is effective in minute dosages, might, in special circumstances, offer an operative temporary protection against interrogation. Conceivably, on the other hand, an adversary service could use such drugs to produce anxiety or terror in medically unsophisticated subjects unable to distinguish drug-induced psychosis from actual insanity. An enlightened operative could not be thus frightened. However, knowing that the effect of these hallucinogenic agents is transient in normal individuals, most broadly, there is evidence that drugs have at least effect on well-adjusted individuals with good defenses and good emotional control, and that anyone who can withstand the stress of competent interrogation in the waking state can and do so in narcosis. The essential resources for resistance thus appear to lie within the individual. Conclusions. The salient points that emerge from this discussion are the following. No such magic brew as a popular notion of truth serums exist. Barbiturates, by disrupting defense patterns, may sometimes be helpful in the interrogation, but even under the best conditions, they will elicit an output contaminated by deception, fantasy, garbled speech, etc. A major vulnerability they produce in subject is a tendency to believe that he has revealed more than he has. It is possible, however, for both normal individuals and psychopaths to resist drug interrogation. It seems likely that any individual who can withstand ordinary offensive interrogation can hold out in narcosis. The best aid to a defense against narco-interrogation is foreknowledge of the process and its limitations. There is an acute need for controlled experimental studies of drug reaction, not only to depressants but also to stimulants, and to combinations of depressants, stimulants, and ataraxics. And then page 37, there's a list of about 29 different references. Moving on to page 38. Admiral Turner, I appreciate that these tawdry activities were taking place long before your watch, and I think you have correctly labeled them as abhorrent, but not only were they abhorrent, it seems to me they were rather bungled, amateurish experiments that don't seem to have been handled in a very scientific way. at least from the scanty evidence we have. It seems to me that there were the minimum of reports and the agency didn't have the ability to call it quits. It went on for some 12 years, as you mentioned. What I would like to get to is, are you convinced now in your agency that those scientific experiments, legitimate ones, that you were conducting with polygraph and so forth, were being conducted in a scientific manner and that you are handling it in a correct manner to get the best information that you are seeking in the end? Admiral Turner: yes, I am. And I have also a sense of confidence that we are limiting ourselves to the areas where we need to be involved as opposed to areas where we can rely on others. Senator Chaffee: I am convinced of that from your report. I just do hope that you have people who are trained and not in handling this type of experiment, but in preparing and the proper reports and drawing the proper data from the reports. You are convinced that you have this type of people? Admiral Turner: yes, sir. Senator Chaffee: the second point I am interested in was the final lines in your testimony here, which I believe are very important, and that is that the agency is doing all it can in cooperation with other branches of the government to go about tracking down the identity of those who were in some way adversely affected, and see what I can be done to fulfill the government's responsibilities in that respect. I might add that I commend you in that, and I hope you will pursue it vigorously. A hospital in my state was involved in these proceedings, and it is unclear exactly what did take place, so I have both a parochial interest in this and a national interest as well, and I do hope you will press on with it. It involves not only you, I appreciate, but also HEW and perhaps the Attorney General. Admiral Turner: thank you, sir, we will. Senator Chaffee: thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Inouye: thank you very much. Admiral Turner: MKUltra Subproject 3 was a project involving the surreptitious administration of LSD on unwitting persons, was it not? Admiral Turner: yes, sir. Senator Inouye: in February 1954, and this was in the very early stages of MKUltra, the director of the Central Intelligence wrote to the technical services staff officials criticizing their judgment because they had participated in an experiment involving the administration of LSD on an unwitting basis to Dr. Frank Olson, who later committed suicide. Now, the individuals criticized were the same individuals who were responsible for this Subproject 3 involving exactly the same practices, even though these individuals were clearly aware of the dangers of surreptitious administration and had been criticized by the director of the Central Intelligence. Page 39. Subproject 3 was not terminated immediately after Dr. Olson's death. In fact, according to the documents, it continued for a number of years. Can you provide this committee with any explanation of how such testing could have continued under these circumstances? Admiral Turner: no, sir, I really can't. Senator Inouye: are the individuals in the technical services who carried on Subproject 3 still on the CIA payroll? Admiral Turner: I am sorry, are you asking, are they today? Senator Inouye: yes. Admiral Turner: no, sir. Senator Inouye: what would you do if you criticized officials of the technical services staff and they continued to carry on experimentation for a number of years? Admiral Turner: I would do two things, sir. One is, I would be sure that at the beginning I was explicit enough that they knew that I didn't want that to be continued anywhere else. And two, if I found it being continued, I would roll some heads. Senator Inouye: could you provide this committee with information as to whether the individuals involved had their heads rolled? Admiral Turner: I don't believe there is any evidence they did, but I will double check that. See page 170 for materials referred to. Senator Inouye. As you know, Senator Huddleston and his subcommittee are deeply involved in the drafting of charters and guidelines for the intelligence community. We will be meeting with the President tomorrow. Our concern is, I think, a basic one. Can anything like this occur again? Admiral Turner, I think it would be very, very unlikely, first because we are all much more conscious of these issues than we were back in the 50s. Second, because we have such thorough oversight procedures. I cannot imagine this kind of activity could take place today without some member of the CIA itself bypassing me. If I were authorizing this and writing to the Intelligence Oversight Board and blowing the whistle on this kind of activity, I am also doing my very best to encourage an openness with myself and free communication in the agency, so that I am the one who keeps you and your committee, so that I am the one who finds these things if they should happen. The fact is that we must keep you and your committee, and now the new committee in the House, informed of our sensitive activities. I think all of these add up to a degree of scrutiny such that this kind of extensive and flagrant activity could not happen today without it coming to the attention of the proper authorities to stop it. Senator Inouye, a sad aspect of MKULTRA project was that it naturally involved the people who unwittingly or wittingly got involved in experimentation. I would appreciate it if you would report back to this committee in 3 months on what the agency has done to notify these individuals and these institutions, and furthermore to notify us as to what steps have been taken to identify victims, and if identified, what you would have done to assist them, monetarily or otherwise. Admiral Turner, all right, sir, I will be happy to. Senator Goldwater, will the senator yield? Senator Inouye, yes, sir. Senator Goldwater, page 40. I wonder if he could include in that report for our information only a complete listing of the individuals and the experiments done on them, and whether they were witting or unwitting, volunteer or non-volunteer, and what has been the result in each case. I think that would be interesting. Admiral Turner, fine, yes, sir. Senator Inouye, Senator Kennedy, thank you. It is your intention to notify the individuals who have been subjects of the research. Is that right? Admiral Turner, do you intend to notify these individuals? Admiral Turner, yes. Senator Kennedy, if you can identify them, you intend to notify them? Admiral Turner, yes. Senator Kennedy, and you intend to notify the universities or research centers as well? Admiral Turner, Senator, I am torn on that. I understand your opening statement. I put myself in the position of the president of one of those universities, let's say. If he were witting, and if his university had been witting of this activity with us, he has access to all that information today. If he were not, I wonder if the process of informing him might put his institution's reputation in more jeopardy than letting them go on the way they are today. Not knowing, I really don't know the inquities here. Senator Kennedy, well, the problem is all you have to do is pick up the newspapers and you see these universities mentioned. In many instances, I think you are putting the university people at an extraordinary disadvantage, where there is a complete change of administration, and they may, for one reason or another, not have information that they are under suspicion. There is innuendo, there is rumor. I cannot help but believe that it will just get smeared all over the newspapers in spite of all the security steps that have been taken. It seems to me that those universities should be entitled to the information so that the ones with other administrations can adapt procedures to protect those universities. The importance of preserving the independence of our research areas and the communities seem to me to be a very fundamental kind of question about the protection of the integrity of our universities and research centers. Admiral Turner, you are saying that you feel that if we identify them privately to themselves, we can benefit them in an adequate way to cover the risk that this will lead to a more public disclosure. There are lots of the 80 who have not been identified publicly at this point. Senator Kennedy, I think the universities themselves should be notified. I think then the universities can take whatever steps in terms of their setting up the procedures to protect their own kinds of integrity in terms of the future. I would certainly hope that they would feel that they could make a public comment or a public statement on it. I think it is of general interest, particularly for the people that are involved in those universities, to have some kind of awareness of whether they were used or were not used and how they were used. I think they are entitled to it, and quite frankly, if there is a public official or an official of the university that you notify and he wants, page 41, for his own particular reasons not to have it public, I don't see why those in a lesser echelon or lower echelon who have been effectively used by it should not have the information as well. So I would hope that you would notify the universities and then also indicate to the public. I can't conceive that this information will not be put out in the newspapers, and it puts the university people at an extraordinary disadvantage. And of course, some of it is wrong, which is the fact of the matter. And I think some university officials saying, well, it isn't so, is a lot different than if they know it is confirmed, or if it is not confirmed in terms of the agency itself. I think that there is a responsibility there. Admiral Turner, I have great sympathy with what you are saying. I have already notified one institution because the involvement was so extensive that I thought they really needed to protect themselves, and I am most anxious to do this in whatever way will help all of the people who are perhaps unwitting participants in this. And the difficulty I will have is I can't quite do, I think, what you suggested, in that I may not be able to tell an institution of the extent and nature of its participation. Senator Kennedy, well, you can tell them to the best of your information. And it seems to me that just because the university or an individual is going to be embarrassed is not a reason for classifying the information. So I would hope, I obviously speak as an individual senator, but I feel that that is an incredible disservice to the innocent individuals, and I think a disservice to the integrity of the universities unless they are notified. To be able to develop procedures you are developing with regards to your own institution, and we are trying to in terms of the Congress. Certainly, the universities are entitled to the same. Admiral Turner, yes, not all of these, of course, were unwitting. Senator Kennedy, that's right. Admiral Turner, many of them were witting, and therefore they can take all those precautionary steps on their own. But I am perfectly open to doing this. I am only interested in doing it in a way that when identifying a university, It will not lead to the public disclosure of the individuals whom I am not allowed to disclose, and so on. Senator Kennedy, that could be done, it seems to me. Admiral Turner, so we will see if we can devise a way of notifying these institutions on a private basis, so that they can then make their own decision whether their equities are best served by their announcing it publicly or their attempting to maintain it. Senator Kennedy, or you, I wonder, what if they were to ask you to announce or indicate? Admiral Turner, my personal conscience, sir, at this time, is that I would be doing a disservice to these universities if I notified the public. Senator Kennedy, would you meet with some university officials and ask what their views are, or whether they feel that the preservation of the integrity of the universities would be better served or not? I think that would be useful to find out from a small, large, private, and public universities officials how they view the integrity. Admiral Turner, fine. I will phone several university presidents today who are my friends and who are not involved in this, and ask them what they think the equities would be. Senator Kennedy, all right, you let us know too. Admiral Turner, but I am not sure that I see that there is any great benefit in notifying the public as opposed to the university notifying them. Let him have his choice whether he wants each institution wants to have it made public. Senator Kennedy, yes. The fact would remain that the institution's credibility would be better served if the institution's president were to deny it, and the university indicated that it did not participate in that program than if the university were to deny it, and the agency says nothing. It seems to me that would be the strongest and only way that is going to be credible. I would value it if you would get some input from universities as to what they believe is the fairest way in terms of the preservation of the integrity of the universities. Let me, if I could, ask on the question of the uses of these safe houses. As I understand from information that was provided to us in the course of the last committee, the testing of various drugs on individuals happened at all social levels, high and low. It happened on Native Americans as well as foreign nationals. That is what I understand was the nature of the project itself. Now, I am wondering whether those tests were conducted at the two locations on the East Coast and the West Coast, which were known as safe houses. To your knowledge, is that correct? Admiral Turner, yes. Senator Kennedy, in terms of research in this particular program, it did not go beyond the safe houses located on the East Coast and the West Coast. I believe I am correct on that. Admiral Turner, that type of unwitting testing is of sort of random selected individuals, yes. Senator Kennedy, it was just located in those two places? Admiral Turner, to the best of our knowledge, there were only two locations. Senator Kennedy, well, how do we interpret randomly selected? Admiral Turner, well, as opposed to prisoners in a prison who were somehow selected. Senator Kennedy, all right. Do you know from this information how many people were recruited during this period? Admiral Turner, no idea. Senator Kennedy, do you know approximately? Admiral Turner, I asked that question the other day, and we just don't have, apparently, We are all, we are very well, either there were no records kept of the actual numbers and types of people tested, or they were destroyed. Senator Inouye. Senator Schweiker. Senator Schweiker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Turner, I would like to come back to the experiments which may have been conducted at the hospital research facilities, which the CIA helped to finance. It wasn't clear to me from your previous answers what kind of work was done there. I gather you are unclear on that, too, from your remarks. Yet I find in the CIA document which you have supplied us a list describing some of the advantages the agency hoped to gain. It says, Senator Schweiker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Turner, I would like to come back to the experiments which may have been conducted at the hospital research facilities which the CIA helped to finance. It wasn't clear to me from your previous answers what kind of work was done there. I gather you are unclear on that too, from your Sorry, I already read that. One moment. It says, page 43, and there is a blank, something has been deleted. It seems pretty clear to me what they intended to do in that particular wing, doesn't it to you? Why would you go to such elaborate preparations to buy part of the wing, bring 3 of your own personnel there, give them a cover, and give them access to patients? Why would you go to such trouble and expense to arrange all that if you weren't planning to experiment on people in the hospital? Admiral Turner, I agree with you 100%, sir. Those were clearly the intentions. I have no evidence that it was carried out in that way. I am not trying to be defensive, Senator. I am only trying to be absolutely precise here. Senator Schweiker. Well, then, as to the nature of what was done there, the last paragraph on the same page of the document says, quote, the facilities of the hospital and the ability to conduct controlled experiments under safe clinical conditions, using materials with which any agency connection must be completely deniable, will augment and complement other programs recently taken over by TSS, such as, end quote. And then there's another deletion. Now, the words following, quote, such as, end quote, have been deleted. That is still classified, or at least it was removed when this document was sanitized and released. It seems to be that whatever was deleted right there would give you a pretty good clue as to what they were doing, since it says that the activities would, quote, augment and complement other programs, end quote, undertaken by TSS. So I have trouble understanding why you don't know what was contemplated. Just the fact that similar programs are referred to in the document, though what they are is still deleted, should enable you to check it out. You could look at what went on in similar programs mentioned following the quote, such as, end quote, in the classified version of this document. Admiral Turner, Senator, I have not said that we don't know what was contemplated being done there. We do not know what was done there. Senator Schweiker, why did you delete that reference? Why is that still classified? That particular project of whatever it is. Admiral Turner, I don't know this particular case. We will get you the exact answer to that one and inform you about it. But it is quite probable that the other case is unrelated to this in the, well, not unrelated, but that was a project that still deserves to be classified. The material referred to follows. Construction of the Gorman Annex was begun in 1957, and the annex was dedicated in March 1959. Of the several MKULTRA projects conducted at Georgetown, only one involving human testing covered a time span subsequent to March 1959. Subproject 45 ran from 1955 to 1963. Thus, it was possible that the Gorman Annex, however, there was no reference to the Gorman Annex or a project moving to a new location in 1959 or later years. Authorization to contribute CIA funds toward the construction of the Gorman Annex is contained in Subproject 35 of MKUltra. Recently discovered material indicated that Dr. Geschichter continued his research for sleep and amnesia-producing drugs under Project MK Search through July 1967 at Georgetown University Hospital. But it is impossible to determine if the facilities of the Gorman Annex were involved. End of page 43.